want to talk about something that I heard the other day that goes something like this. Every seed has the potential of a forest. That impacted me so deeply. And it's so insightful. If you really start to peel that layer back, like if you really start to think about the implications of what that actually means, right? There's so many different levels to it. And I'm going to touch on a few. I'm not going to go too, it depends on where this conversation goes, but if you really think about that and just let's just take you as a person or just take a person as that seed, right? You start to realize that that person as the seed has the potential to grow a forest in their life, right? How it shows up is what they nurture, how they build it, how they plant it, how they make this forest grow. And the implications are so deep is because, if you start to really think about it from childhood up to adolescence to adulthood, right? A lot of times when you're building that forest, when you're building those things, you're building it with things that people have given you that told you that this is what you should do. This is how you should do things. And early in life, that might be okay because you need to know what, the difference between good and bad and things like that, right? But what ends up happening though is you start to realize that maybe certain things don't align with you and you start planting different things. Your forest starts growing in different ways. You start to notice that there's a lily here, a tulip there, a lotus here, an oak tree there. And those are all the things that you start to implement into your forest that you were growing as a child, right? And it's so amazing how when you have communication with someone, when you talk to someone, if you just take this for a second and you really think about it, right? Like, again, you're the seed, you're the person, you've been growing this forest your whole life. So when you're conversing with someone and you're having a conversation, you really start to see what it is that they were cultivating, right? You really get an idea as to what kind of forest that they're cultivating, right? You got some people who can hide things very well. Sure, some people aren't going to open up to you right away, but I'm talking about people that you really have a good conversation where you kind of get a deep understanding of who they are, and you get a good understanding of, again, what kind of forest they've invested in, what they've invested in their forest, and again, the beauty and the implications of that is in having a conversation with someone, you can also know if that forest is on fire. And this is a little bit deeper because what ends up happening is if you apply that, and I'm sure a lot of you can apply that to people that you know right now, but if you really apply that, you start to realize that people are going to speak to you from the terms of the life that they're in currently. And you can have someone who has grown this beautiful forest and you can love to talk to that person all the time, but you can also know that one person whose forest is always burning and they're only going to talk to you from that space, right? And you gotta allow the grace of that's that person. You got some people that their forests are always burning. I said forests. It's not even really where their forests are always burning, right? It's always on fire. It's always a fire alarm, But even knowing that that person is their forest is always on fire, that that's who they are. People will only meet you as far as they have met themselves. Mel Robbins, I heard Mel Robbins say that, and that's very true, which applies to this, and you really start to, the implications again are very deep because you start to really peel back those layers and you really start thinking about, well, what have I cultivated in my life? What kind of forest am I cultivating? What am I really adding to help this grow? How am I going to help this seed grow into the potential of the forest that it could be, the wonderful, lush forest that it could be? Right? What am I doing every day? And you start to realize that intent is huge. You have to always have intent in the things that you do, because if you don't walk with intention, you fall on your defaults, and your defaults are what carries you on your day-to-day. The things that you meet on the day-to-day. You might be aggravated at work. Somebody may be able to imprint their aggravation on you, or that person whose forest is burning, right? They're able to project. That's a better word, right? They're able to project their burning forest on you, right? And then yours starts to burn, right? Even something like that, right? You gotta pay very close attention as to the people that you let into your forest, because they could start fires, right? It could be a whole kumbaya in the beginning, right? You see them sitting there rubbing those sticks together, thinking it's gonna be a beautiful campsite, and everybody's gonna sit around this fire singing kumbaya. But next thing you know, your shit is ablaze, because even that, building this forest, you gotta pay close attention as to who you let into it too, because again, people have lived to start fires. Those same people who are always on fire could be the people that want to set your shit on fire, right? And again, it's so deep when you really think about it. That one saying, every seed has the potential of a forest. And then when you start to spin it a little more, right? You figure, okay, well, I have children. Those are my seeds. And I'm sure we've heard that term, right? Those are my seeds. They have the potential of a forest. Now, what are you going to do with your intent to make sure that their forest grows and gets cultivated in a healthy way, right? Again, this goes back into that moving with intent. Your words, intentful words, intentful actions, things that matter, things that make you not fall into your defaults, because your defaults, everybody in the majority of the planet is on cruise control. Majority of the planet is in default mode, right? And if you let it take you, there's no intent in anything. Those very select few people, the ones that are successful, the ones that do things relevant, relevant things in their lives, whether, they become a movie star, a dancer, performer, a business owner, right? The difference between them and anyone else is that they're not in default mode. They move with intent. They're looking to make sure that that seed continues to grow, right? They're looking to make sure that their forest is going to be lush. They're going to have a pond with lotus flowers, right? They're going to have a rose bush, although those are thorny sometimes, but you see where I'm going with that. They're gonna have an oak tree. They're gonna have tulips, lilies, frogs, birds, crows, all kinds of stuff, right? And I know it sounds a little corny when I start to explain it that way, but I think for the most part, I think you understand what it is that I'm trying to say. And the implications of just kind of hearing that statement and just knowing that, putting your mind to it, intentfully putting your mind to that phrase is impactful, because you start to realize, when I wake up in the morning, what's my first thought? What's my first intent? Am I going to go into default mode and, I got to do this again today? Nah, that's not intentful. That's default, right? You're in your default mode. Waking up with, what I did yesterday wasn't productive. Here's what I'm going to do today. Have intent with what you're going to do today. Have intent on what you're going to do to grow that forest, to grow that seed, whether it's your life, whether it's your children, whether it's your job, your marriage. You see how all these little things that I'm talking about, you start to realize that those are all the seeds that you're planting. These are all the forests that you're building, right? And the point of it is really you trying to make sure that you cultivate something healthy. You cultivate something with intent, right? You don't want to set shit on fire. It was a thought that I had that it was one of the books that I was reading, and I heard that, and it really impacted it impacted me in a lot of ways, and I really started to pay attention to what it is that I do on the regular, and how sometimes I might just scale back and fall into default mode and not move with intent, and how I realized that most of my life, I was growing a forest that may not always have my own things in them because they were planted by other people, right? Which is, again, it's not always a bad thing because you need a foundation, right? But then again, you start to realize there's things that you probably have planted that weren't healthy. You probably have cultivated things that were good, and you started to have a self identification as you got older, and you started to add things and aligned yourself with things that made a little bit more sense to you, in either with the foundation or moving away from that foundation, but again, in a healthy way, with intent, to make sure that there's growth. Because I'll tell you another thing that I heard that was crazy, right? A tree that grows doesn't stay the same. Now, that is in direct correlation with what I just said to you, right? There's all these sayings that are telling you, when you move, you got to move with intent. When you move, when you learn things, when you step outside of your box, because default is that box. So when you step out of that box, you start to grow, you start to see things, you start to become more, you start to realize that the movements that you have intent, which is why you are now outside of that box. You see what I'm saying? You see where I'm going with this? Again, the implications of some of those sayings are huge. Some of them are huge. And it's just a thought that I wanted to put on videos, a thought that I've wanted to share with you guys. I hope it's meaningful as much to you guys as it was to me. That is all that I have today. I want y'all to do what you do it well, do it the best way you know how. Jay Cotto, I am out. Peace.